in 2012 when we announced the Twitter API version 1.1, and developers just jump on board, embrace the platform to create a vast range of experiences. Some of them we didn't even see possible with the platform. And all these experiences helped Twitter thrive as a community and as a product. Let's not forget, it's the community that really popularized the word tweet, or even conceptualized the hashtag as we know it today. Now, it's 2019, it's almost 2020. We're still on version 1.1. But people are using and keep using the platform in such a diverse range of ways. And with time, we also understood the need to make the developer experience easier and more modern. So though that version hasn't changed, a lot of things have changed. And a few things have come, some of which you can see here, like media upload, mute button, Periscope. A few things have gone away, like a few obsolete data fields. But the need for developers to build and keep building kept growing and changed as we evolved the platform and as the world changed as well. But because the experience stayed largely the same, we've been slow to listen to and to incorporate developer feedback. And also, because we had accumulated and hoarded like such an extensive set of APIs, developers had a hard time understanding, for example, which endpoint to use between two very similar endpoints to build what they needed to build. And obviously, we knew that we had to do a little bit better than that, because this impacts a lot of things for developers, including time to HelloWorld. I think if you work in developer relations like I do, you should have at least a fascination with time to HelloWorld, or at most an obsession. It's incredibly important. Our mission at Developer Relations at Twitter is to serve and grow the current and future generation of developers and to ensure they succeed with the platform. This is developers like you and I. I'm a developer myself. But what is the actual definition of time to HelloWorld? Like when we start like understanding this time to success, time to value, time to first request, there isn't a lot of agreement out there. Resources are quite scarce, to say the least. There is not a clear definition. This is what I came up with when I started to look up time to first request, or API time to HelloWorld. It's kind of gets very literal, like time to first request, like a lot of details on how to make your first request with any API, or like time to HelloWorld. It's all about like writing your own, your first HelloWorld program, like Echo HelloWorld. But there's this one result in particular that struck me. Like to summarize, pointing me to the right direction, it says that you need to get developer access to your API, and the result of using the API should be less than 30 minutes. But like, why 30 minutes? Like, this sounds a little arbitrary. Like, why not 3 minutes? Like, why not 30 seconds? So, clicking through the results, I read this. The record for somebody to integrate their online service with our SMS API was 8 minutes. Again, why does it have to be a record? I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me. So we wanted to really understand why the meaning of this number, why the need for a record to break. So what we started to really get and understand the developer a little bit better. Like, what do they do? How do they come across an API platform? So we started to get a little bit further and start like listening a lot from developers. And we started to understand what do they do on their way to HelloWorld. And we came up with this. This is a simplification, but it's something that a large organization can come up with. It's a developer funnel. You might find a lot of those if you search on the internet. You might find like so many different variations. They kind of all make sense, actually. And because this is very tricky for any organization, and this is why you see a lot of them. So you may see that developers can come from a different perspective, from different backgrounds themselves, so they might need to have different touch points, and maybe they approach your platform first, then they go back, then they start learning a little bit more, and so on and so forth. If you have more of these, it means that you have many developer personas. And if they matter to you, and they should, then you should take multiple funnels into account. So what does Time to HelloWorld touch in this case? I would say in this case, it touches everything from awareness to build, which is probably the first meaningful point of contact between a developer and a first successful request. So I think I kind of made my point here, like that Time to HelloWorld is not a race. If we transform that number into a race, then it becomes a KPI that only serves our purpose, and that's not right. We exist because developers serve a purpose with our platform. So we just are means to an end, and the end is to enable developers with meaningful experiences. Developers are people, and they have needs, they have lives, they have bugs and issues that get in the way sometimes, so we need to make their lives as easier as possible. And some of them can and should proceed at different speeds, using different touch points. Like, for example, a casual developer can take more time to find more inspiration because maybe they don't have a fully fledged use case. And somebody who's actually working for a company that needs to implement your platform maybe already has a clear set of tasks that needs to perform with your API. So there are 3 moments to HelloWorld, really, if you want to break it down. Sign up, access, and then the first successful request. Sign up is when you decide that you need to create an app, you need to use this API. It can actually be a known step if you're one of those developers that already work for a company that has an established use case, or if you already have an app ID. So in this case, I would say probably a more careful representation will be this. Time between sign up and access is actually shorter than the time from access to your first meaningful request. And access is when you actually get your app ID and your tokens and keys, and you are enabled to make your first successful request, yet you haven't made it. And this is for a reason. So the time is longer for a reason, because when you interact in this phase with the platform, you have a totally different set of resources and things that you had to do. And it might take a little bit of a longer time to really understand how to make your successful request. It's a more tangible steps in terms of tools that you also have. So when we see things like this, it looks like it has to be like this single number, specific number to break, specific KPI. I don't think that's right. Time to HelloWorld depends on the developer, and multiple developers have multiple barriers of entry. I think the case for this is like if you think of other metrics that are related to APIs, like latency, for example. Latency is defined as the time between a request and a response. And it's measured taking into account the fact that different developers can experience different response times based on their internet connection, their location, their tool sets, and a bunch of other factors. So that's why at scale, with large platforms, there's also a much better way of defining time to success. And I just wanted to show you how. Like, let's think of, I don't know, imagine if we could compute the time to HelloWorld for each individual developers on our platform. So this is what we did. So this is not actual numbers, but pretty representative. This is my team. And this is the individual time to HelloWorld for each one of them. Not to shame anybody, randomized names. You immediately see probably 2 things. You see that pretty much everybody got started in 8 minutes or less, and there are 2 outliers. Maybe outliers, maybe not. Now, if we wanted to apply that single number kind of strategy, like how do we measure like this single time to hello world in this case? How do we compute it? Should we, I don't know, try and average it out? So if we try and average it out, if you trust my math, an average is the sum of all these numbers divided by the number of people in this distribution. If you trust my math, it's 24.45 minutes. And again, it doesn't sound right, because it doesn't represent the vast majority of developers that got started in a reasonable amount of time. It's skewed toward these two outliers. So how do we do that? There's actually another way, and it's we could compute a median, which is basically we take the center point of the distribution. And if you do that, that goes down to 3. Why? Because basically, in math terms, a median says that 50% of your distribution, so 50% of your developers got started in this amount of time or less. Like I said, this is basically the physical center point of your distribution. So you're not limited also to this 50%. You could compute the time to the world for 75% of developers, 90, 25%, and so on and so forth. If you do that, this is the result. So you can actually set up goals for like the fastest cohort of developers and for pretty much everybody else in between. We calculate the 99 percentile, or P99, so that we can leave that 1% margin of error, so we don't overdo in spending too much efforts in really taking care of these true outliers. So in this case, since we have this very defined cohorts, we can also start understanding them, start seeing why they are so fast or why they're so slow. And if we do that, let's start inspecting like this 50th percentile here. So this one took 1 minute to get started because he already had an app. Now I'm also curious to understand why the other people in the cohort, especially the outliers, to take such a long time. So this one signed up before lunch, and then he made his first request after lunch, which is kind of a legit reason to be an outlier, if you ask me. And this other one, oh, okay, he had a bad internet connection, so he tried multiple times before he could make a successful request. So this is like a more interesting way to measure time to hello world. Just use percentiles because they give you more flexibility. They're not skewed towards outliers and allow you to create classes of users that you would then can optimize for. So when we see goals, we can actually rewrite our own internal goals to say things like this. We want to make sure that 50% of developers should get started in no more than 3 minutes, and that the vast majority of developers in our platform can get started in 60 minutes or less. So those are not our actual goals, but those are ideas that you can use in order to get started, knowing that if you're optimizing for 99% of developers, you're already optimizing for 50% of developers. Yet, you can create specific initiatives and strategies to further optimize for your fastest cohorts. Now, okay, this is like great theory, like Maths 101. How do we make this happen? I think we can start defining properly how to measure time to success, time to hello world. But at the same time, we won't make a lot of progress if we don't really shake the ground, if we don't break new ground. And the way we wanted to do it is by just like starting from scratch, by listening to the developers and to the community and creating a new developer experience, a completely new developer experience. Now, the API we built in 2012 still serves us well and serve the developers well. But since we can do much better in terms of listening to them, and that's what we're starting doing again, we're doing something new. We're launching this new program called Tour Developer Labs. It's a way for you to test drive the next generation of the Tour API we're building right now. It's a way for you to provide us with feedback as we build before we make any changes. It's a way for us to build in the open, to test, to iterate fast. It's a way to listen to what you like, to what you don't like. It's a way for you to influence our roadmap. And this is a first step. We started in June by releasing these 2 endpoints, get tweets and get users. With get tweets, you can get up to 100 tweets and get users up to 100 users per call. And to give you a sense of how fast we are iterating based on developer feedback, we are already at the 3rd iteration only on those 2 endpoints alone. The metrics API didn't exist before. This is new, and we launched that last week. We are revamping the way you can actually use the platform by exposing an open API spec, which is basically a contract that tells you exactly what endpoints are available, what parameters are available, and you can even create your own documentation based on a fantastic set of tools that the Open API community put out there, open source. We've been debating a lot between GraphQL and REST, but then we actually had this clever way of creating things like expansions and selectable formats that allow you to request the data you need in the API call you're making in that specific moment. So, for example, if you need the author object from a tweet, you can just request it as an expansion, and that saves you 2 API calls. We are actually implementing great path versioning, so we're not staying on version 1.1 forever, for another 7 years. And obviously more samples and Postman, which has been extremely helpful, extremely helpful. And since we're listening, we also have a dedicated feedback site where you can actually tell us how we're doing, and if there's anything you think we should implement or anything that we're doing particularly well that we should keep doing. We listen for real, to the point that actually we implemented already features back on get tweets and get users based on developer feedback we found here. And us at DevRel obviously are on these forums, but also we advocate for you towards product, and product has the right access to this. So it's kind of a big deal here. And in terms of time to HelloWorld, Labs also helps us because since developers are shaping and helping us shape the future of our platform, then it means that when we are going to be releasing this production version of those endpoints, they will be ready. So it's a good way to really transform wait into anticipation. If you're particularly excited about this and you want to test it out, then by the time they're ready, you'll be ready too. And also, like we said, developers might be looking for inspiration. So this is also when we can shorten the time to HelloWorld. So for example, our Twitter community forums, where developers can get started or even ask questions and find good solves for problems like this that don't find an answer or coverage in the docs necessarily. So if you have a specific need, people in the community, and again, DevRel is there, but there are also fantastic community members that don't work at Twitter, but they're so passionate that they answer questions on our behalf as well. And for this, I'm obviously extremely grateful, and so are pretty much everybody at Twitter. Or this, while you wait, you can read a forum post or a blog post or a tutorial or a quick start guide, so you have ready-made examples that you can try out and see if that inspires you. We are doubling down on this effort, so you're going to find a lot more. Just a few days ago, we published a blog post to highlight what students came up with on the Twitter developer platform. On that note, since people can come from multiple different backgrounds, it's important to offer them as many options as possible to get started quickly. And this is why we made a lot more of ready-made examples in multiple code languages. We went and understood how developers use our platform with what clients and languages, and we made sure that their favorite languages are there. Those examples are copy-paste ready, so all you have to do is to just provision access to the platform, enter your credentials, and you're good to go. We tripled the number of developer touch points to get started, obviously. And obviously, Postman, this is like a quick win for pretty much everybody. A great way not only to get started and to test out your APIs, but also to explore the labs endpoints quickly with inline documentation. And it's been proven extremely beneficial even internally for us to test out things before they even go live. And to maximize the surface area, you also need to make sure that developers take the least amount possible of steps to get started. Obviously, we don't want to get in the way. It's like, you maximize the surface area and you have this like such big beam of light, but then at the same time, you need to make sure that this beam of light is, precise, laser focused to this only one objective, which is making sure that developers make their first meaningful request in a considerably shorter amount of time than they're used to. This is where all the optimization happens. For example, if you download our Postman collection, you can go to t.co/labsdocs, and you're going to find this big purple rainbow in Postman button. We placed it everywhere, so you can't miss it. You'll see how we did optimize that. So for some endpoints, you can choose between auth with user context or authentication with bearer token, and you kind of had to figure it out yourself. And we thought this wasn't really right. We should make this choice for pretty much everybody, so that if you go to the authorization tab in your Postman console, you'll find no configuration whatsoever. Why? Because we created a pre-request script that figures out authentication for you based on the endpoint. So even if an endpoint can select multiple authentication types, we make that decision for you, trusting you that you can go and explore the differences if you want to switch between authentication methods. But the goal for us is to make sure that you get started as quickly as possible. So it's a win-win for everybody. There's more to come soon, very soon, very soon. Just can't wait. So check out our public roadmap, t.co/roadmap. You're going to see a lot of exciting stuff happening over the coming weeks. T.co/labs. This is available right now. I really invite you to join us and let us know what you think and try it out. And I can't wait to see the awesome things you're going to build on top of the next generation of the Twitter API. Thank you.